I'm David from Cooking Chat, and I am excited to be here with another great winery to feature today. Marissa Dineen is with us from Dineen Vineyards, the second generation owner of that winery. And as we'll get into in this discussion, I have had a chance to taste some of their wonderful wines from Yakima Valley, and we'll be talking more about that. Before I plunge into all my wine geek stuff about the wine I tried, let you say hello, Marissa.
Hi, David, and thank you so much for having me today. We're thrilled to talk a little bit about our winery and have a discussion of how it pairs well with food.
Great. Well, I love that topic, the food and wine pairing, but let's start with a little backstory, if we could, about Dineen Vineyards. What's the story? How did it come to
Sure.
be?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think there's kind of three driving forces behind the founding and the ongoing operation of our winery and vineyard. First is really an ode to family. So my father, who founded the winery, grew up in a large Irish Catholic family, with a lot of ties to the Irish lore and history, which you may or may not know, the Irish were in Bordeaux. So that's a link to wine. The second would be pursuit of joy. My mother and father always enjoyed company of others, travel, food and wine, and they just found a lot of happiness in kind of that conviviality, if you will. And then the third, I would say, is really an interest in learning and continual learning. So the genesis of our vineyard was my father's retirement project. So he started it a few years ago before he retired and has been doing it ever since. So 20 years now.
That is great. Well, I am very interested. I'm mostly Irish, but I didn't know any about the Irish and Bordeaux connection. But I think that could lead us down a whole nother path that we don't want to talk about necessarily today. We might have to have you back on to cover that topic. But why don't we jump in? If you could, unfortunately, probably be a while before those of us live further away will get to visit, although we're getting maybe a little closer to that time when we might feel safe getting on an airplane again. But assuming people like me who are further away aren't going to get to see your winery super soon, can you paint the picture a little bit? What does it look like? What's the terroir, the climate, all that good stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So the Yakima Valley is really the fruit basket of the United States. So it is historically was the riverbed of the Columbia River, which is now kind of shifted. And then it also has a lot of volcanic soil. As you know, Washington State is home of Mount St. Helens and other volcanoes. And the combination of those created quite mineral fertile soils. And then in the early 20th century, the Army Corps of Engineers introduced irrigation. And so that really brought out the ability to farm that area. So what do you see? You see wide open, huge valleys, mountains in the background. So it's quite stunning, stunning views from that perspective. And our particular site is quite high. So we overlook, if you're sitting in our tasting room, for example, you overlook all of our vines. We have about 75 acres under plant. You also see the wider Yakima Valley and Mount Rainier and Mount Adams in the background. So it's a very enjoyable day out.
That sounds gorgeous. That sounds gorgeous. And the weather, what's the weather like this time of year? Is it starting to get in what's going on in the vineyard?
Yes.
We're recording this, by the way. This is just past St. Patrick's Day. Speaking of that, the Irish. So here in mid to late March, what's going on, if anything, in the vineyard?
Exactly. So Yakima Valley is more or less a high desert. So without irrigation, it'd be pretty difficult to grow things. We get about 350, 360 days of sunshine a year, which is significant. At the moment, the temperatures are inching towards the 60s. Some days can be warmer, some days cooler. Evenings are a lot cooler. And we're getting very close to bud break. So the sap is starting to flow and buds will be bursting pretty soon and the season will be off and running.
That sounds great. That's definitely a great sign of spring, huh? It's the buds breaking.
Indeed.
Great. Let's start diving into some of the wines though. So I'm going to show the wine that you kindly sent my way. It's a little hard to see here. It is your Heritage Blend why don't you tell us a little bit about this wine, and then I'll talk a little bit about the food that I served up with it.
Sure, absolutely. So our heritage red blend is kind of our high-end blend of our vineyard. This particular one has three varietals: Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. So more, I'd call it left bank in style if you're looking at Bordeaux. Owing to our higher elevation, you're going to get a lot of like elegant rounded fruits, not the jamminess that you might see elsewhere. We barrel age that in half neutral, half new oak. So you get some structure to it, but you won't feel a lot of heaviness. And for those reasons, it pairs wonderfully with food. And it's great to drink now, or it could probably sit in your cellar for 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, I agree. It drinks beautifully now, I think, definitely. And when we were chatting before the event we did in early March, you kind of turned me on to the idea that it could go with Italian food and pasta, which I wouldn't typically think of with a left bank style red blend with that kind of grape composition. You want to. So I know it, and I can tell. So I made a lamb ragu pasta with some rosemary and finished with a little ricotta with some fresh basil. So it's definitely had those herbs going on. Not a lot of tomato, a little bit of tomato, more sort of as a ragu, typically as more with the meat and the broth and so forth. A little touch of tomato, and I also threw in a little mushrooms. But you didn't tell me to make that exactly, but you did point me in the direction. Can you tell me that sort of a little bit as to why you think this particular wine does work nicely with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. The tomatoes can be very difficult to pair because they can be acidic, they can be sweet, they stand very well on their own. So you need to have a wine that has the acidity to not kind of get flabby in front of tomatoes, but also the fruit forwardness to stand up to what can be a very rather sweet sauce, actually. And I think because we do have a lot of sunshine, long growing days, our wines tend to display a lot of fruit. Again, not overly fruity, not too much of a high sugar content, but you've got those fruit floral notes. And then the acidity, because we do have, despite the hot days, 90 plus for a month or two in the summer, we get very cool overnight temperatures, and that lends to acidity.
Nice. Yeah, that's great growing conditions, right? That's perfect. Those hot days rather, and cool nights. Nice for sleeping as well.
Absolutely.
And cooking.
Not good for camping. You might be a little freezing, but that's okay.
Right. And I know you're into the food side of things, so maybe if you could give us an idea of some of the other wines you have, and maybe while you're at it, touch upon some of the things you like to serve with those. So if people get motivated to order some wine from you, they could also have in the back of their mind some things they might want to try eating with it.
Absolutely. Well, I, like you, have a few bottles here with me. So the first one I'll talk about, sorry with the virtual background, it doesn't show up. So let me just talk through it. Okay. It's our 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet grows extremely well in our site. Again, the lovely fruit flavors complemented by the acidity. It's a perennial favorite. I love it with all kinds of, some people don't like this terminology, but rich, more fatty style meats. So a prime rib, a great T-bone. Those just are fantastic. Lamb chops, also a good pairing. I've made it with porchetta. And if you want something a little bit lighter or dessert-like, it's fabulous with dark chocolate. And anything with really more plum. So if you do like a plum tart, very nice as well.
Nice, yeah.
We also have a Viognier. So moving to the whites, Viognier, for those who don't know, is a Rhone varietal. In our site, it has a lot of hints of almonds, apricots, as well as minerality. So owing to that, it goes very well with any dish that has cream because of the apricot and almond. But because of the minerality, fabulous with seafood.
Sure.
So think, a nice fish, grilled shrimp, um, anything kind of like that would go very nicely with it. And I would also say we have a Cabernet Franc. I'm jumping around here a little bit back to the reds, but
Mhm.
we're actually quite known for Cabernet Franc. In fact, our kind of region is one of the premier growing regions for Cabernet Franc in the United States. So we tend to get a more rounded mouthfeel out of our Cab Franc, a lot of floral notes in it. So that just is absolutely delicious with anything quite earthy is complementary to it. So you talked about mushrooms before, that's wonderful. Eggplant. Um, I think it's the perfect Thanksgiving wine. It goes amazing with all kinds of game, but turkey is really a nice pairing too.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. So there's definitely some good pairing. So I look forward to trying more. So far I've tried your heritage blend, and definitely I checked out yours and signed up for your wine club. So I'll be finding more coming my way soon, which I look forward to. One thing we talked about when we spoke before that I found interesting, if you could talk a little bit, obviously everybody, regardless of your walk of life, your business has had to adapt in the past year. But could you tell a little bit about how COVID impacted you and how you adapted your business to continue to survive and even thrive in these times?
Absolutely. So I think our wine growing business, we really just had to step up our procedures to keep all of our employees safe. Because as you can imagine, having half your workforce out at harvest could be really detrimental. So that we implemented day one, lots of hand washing, social distancing, masks, etc. The one side of our business that was a bit trickier is actually wine sales. So starting in March, our tasting room was closed. We entered 2020 where our only channel was out of our tasting room because we really are a boutique winery.
Yeah.
So we quickly had to pivot. We started a web shop. We launched our wine club, as we just talked about in 2021, just to bring the Dineen experience to more people.
Mhm.
And we've been really kind of overwhelmed with the success of those two. So a lot of people came out of the woodwork who weren't able to travel to us any longer, sent our wine as gifts to others, and we were very blessed and had a great year as a result.
That's great. So maybe that might be a good wrap up point if you could just highlight if people are interested in learning more, whether it's your club or what have you. And I think you maybe a reference, but as I understand, they really need to go to your website or your winery as opposed to you're not gonna find it in your grocery store or your local wine shop, right? If I'm not-
Absolutely. So as mentioned, we are a boutique winery. So coming direct to us is the best way and sometimes the only way to get hold of our product. So you can find us on dineenvineyards.com. We're also on Instagram. It's Dineen_Vineyards. We're on Facebook as Dineen Vineyards. We just launched Twitter. So you name it, we're on all the social media channels. And you can also just pick up the phone and call us. If you Google us, you'll find us, and we'd be happy to walk you through our selection. And if you haven't ever experienced our wines, I'd encourage you to take a look at our YouTube channel. We've got some tasting notes on there of live tasting, so it will give you a sense. And then also you can just chat with us via the chat feature on our website if you have specific questions.
That's great. Well, perfect. That sounds like a lot of great ways people can connect with your wonderful wine. And it's been great to chat a little bit more. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
My pleasure, David. You've been wonderful to work with.